The discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt in 1945 revolutionized our understanding of early Christianity. Among the many ancient texts found were writings that challenged the traditional narrative of Christian origins, offering alternative interpretations of biblical stories and spiritual beliefs. One of the most fascinating aspects of these texts is their connection to the Gnostics, a group that presented a radically different view of Christianity from what later became mainstream. But despite the growing interest in Gnosticism, this subject is still surrounded by misconceptions and conflicting perspectives. The term Gnostic is used in different ways. It originates from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge, but not just any knowledge. A deeper, intuitive, spiritual insight that goes beyond ordinary understanding. In the ancient world, many philosophical and religious traditions spoke about gnosis. For instance, the Hermeticists contrasted gnosis with episteme, or intellectual knowledge. Some early Christian thinkers, like Clement of Alexandria, also used the term to refer to an advanced spiritual state. Even today, the term Gnostic is applied broadly, sometimes even to Islamic mystics, Sufis, where Arabic words like irfan and arif have similar meanings. But in the context of early Christianity, Gnosticism refers to a distinct movement, one that had complex spiritual teachings and a unique interpretation of creation, salvation, and divine authority. The origins of Gnostic thought. The Gnostics were one of many Christian groups in the first few centuries after Jesus, each interpreting his message in different ways. But unlike what is sometimes assumed, early Christianity was not a single unified church that later divided into heresies. Instead, it was a diverse movement with competing interpretations from the very beginning. For most of history, our knowledge of the Gnostics came from their opponents, early church writers who labeled them as heretics. Irenaeus of Lyon, one of the most famous early Christian bishops, wrote extensively against them in the 2nd century, trying to discredit their beliefs. But everything changed with the Nag Hammadi discovery. Suddenly, we had access to the writings of the Gnostics themselves, giving us a more direct look at their worldview. These texts revealed a rich, complex spiritual tradition, one that presented a dramatically different version of Christianity from what later became the official church. Despite this breakthrough, scholars continue to debate how to define Gnosticism. Some see it as a broad intellectual and religious movement that included many different groups, such as the Valentinians, Marcionites, Sethians, and even non-Christian traditions like the Manichaeans. Others argue that Gnosticism was not a single movement at all, but rather a modern label applied to a diverse set of ancient beliefs. A more balanced approach, suggested by scholars like David Bracker, defines Gnosticism as a distinct school of thought within early Christianity, particularly associated with the Sethians, a group that saw themselves as the true heirs of divine knowledge. Who were the Gnostics? To understand Gnosticism, we need to look at the religious landscape of early Christianity. Unlike later history, where Christianity became institutionalized, the first few centuries were a period of intense debate and diversity. Some early church leaders, like Irenaeus, presented history as if there was one true church, from which heretics later diverged. But modern scholarship sees things differently. In reality, early Christianity was a fluid, evolving movement, with multiple groups claiming to represent the true teachings of Jesus. The Gnostics were one of these groups, but their beliefs and teachings were radically different from those that eventually became Christian orthodoxy. The Gnostic perspective on early Christianity. The Gnostics were not just another Christian sect, they represented a profoundly different approach to understanding spiritual reality. While later Orthodox Christianity emphasized faith, obedience, and the authority of the Church, the Gnostics focused on inner knowledge, gnosis, direct spiritual experience, and liberation from the material world. For most of history, our knowledge of Gnostic beliefs came from critics, church authorities like Irenaeus, who saw them as a dangerous deviation. But thanks to the Nag Hammadi Library, we now have Gnostic writings themselves, allowing us to study their ideas firsthand. The Gnostic worldview. One of the most striking differences between Gnosticism and mainstream Christianity is its view of the material world. In traditional Christianity, God is seen as the benevolent creator of all things, including the physical universe. In Gnostic thought, however, the material world is seen as a prison, created by a lesser, imperfect divine being rather than the true, ultimate God. This idea led to a radical reinterpretation of biblical stories. For example, in the book of Genesis, the God of the Old Testament creates Adam and Eve and commands them not to eat from the tree of knowledge. In mainstream Christian tradition, this is seen as a test of obedience. Eating the fruit leads to the fall of humanity. But in the Gnostic interpretation, the story is flipped. The God who forbids knowledge is actually a lower, flawed being, often called the Demiurge or Yaldabaoth, while the serpent is not a deceiver, but a liberator, a messenger from the true divine realm, trying to help humanity awaken to its higher nature. This idea was deeply controversial, as it challenged the very foundation of Jewish and Christian theology. The Gnostic concept of God, unlike the monotheistic view of a single, all-powerful creator, the Gnostics described a complex, layered spiritual reality. 1. At the highest level exists the true, unknowable God, often called the One, the Monad, or the invisible spirit. 2. From this ultimate source emanate various divine beings, aeons, forming a vast spiritual realm known as the Pleroma. 3. One of these aeons, Sophia, wisdom, acts outside the divine order and accidentally creates a flawed being, Yaldabaoth. 4th Yaldabaoth, ignorant of the true God, creates the physical world, trapping divine sparks within human bodies. This leads to the core problem in Gnostic thought. Humanity is divine in essence, but trapped in a false reality ruled by a lower, imperfect power. The key to liberation is gnosis, a direct inner realization of one's divine origin. This stark duality between the true spiritual realm and the false material world is what makes Gnosticism so unique. Unlike mainstream Christianity, which teaches that salvation comes through faith and divine grace, the Gnostics believed that only knowledge, gnosis, could free the soul from illusion. Jesus in the Gnostic tradition. The Gnostics considered Jesus to be a divine messenger sent from the true God to awaken humanity. However, their understanding of Jesus differed greatly from the later Christian church. In Orthodox Christianity, Jesus is both fully divine and fully human, and his suffering on the cross is central to salvation. In Gnostic thought, Jesus is often portrayed as purely spiritual, with no physical body. His appearance in the world was an illusion meant to communicate higher truths. This belief, known as Docetism, directly contradicted the mainstream Christian doctrine that Jesus physically suffered and died for humanity's sins. For the Gnostics, Jesus' true mission was not to die as a sacrifice, but to reveal the secret knowledge that could free people from the control of the Demiurge and the material world. This is why some Gnostic texts, like the Gospel of Judas, present Judas Iscariot not as a betrayer, but as the only disciple who truly understood Jesus' mission. In this interpretation, Judas helps Jesus escape the material world, rather than simply handing him over to his enemies. Such interpretations were shocking to early Christian leaders, which is why many of these texts were condemned and ultimately lost, until their rediscovery in modern times. The struggle for authority in early Christianity. The Gnostic interpretation of Jesus and the spiritual nature of salvation put them in direct conflict with other early Christian groups. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Christianity was far from unified. It was a collection of competing ideas, doctrines, and interpretations, each claiming to represent the true message of Jesus. One of the key figures in this debate was Irenaeus of Lyon, a bishop who wrote extensively against the Gnostics in his work against heresies. He accused them of corrupting Christianity, claiming that they had strayed from the true teachings of the apostles. Irenaeus and other church leaders sought to define orthodoxy, a correct version of Christianity that could unify the movement. This meant rejecting competing interpretations, including the Gnostic worldview. But at the time, the outcome of this struggle was far from certain. The Nag Hammadi Library, a glimpse into Gnostic thought. For centuries, our only knowledge of the Gnostics came from their critics, church writers who sought to discredit them. But the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945 changed everything. This collection of ancient Coptic manuscripts contained Gnostic writings that had been lost for nearly 1600 years. Among these texts were the Gospel of Thomas, a collection of Jesus' sayings, some of which resemble those in the New Testament, but with a strong emphasis on inner knowledge. The Secret Book of John, a detailed account of the Gnostic creation myth, describing the false god Yaldabaoth and the hidden divine realm. The Gospel of Judas, a controversial text that presents Judas Iscariot not as a traitor, but as the only disciple who truly understood Jesus' mission. These texts provided a direct look at Gnostic beliefs, confirming that they had a sophisticated theology, one that differed dramatically from what became mainstream Christianity, the Gnostic view of humanity. A central idea in Gnosticism is that human beings have a dual nature. The physical body was created by the Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, and is part of the material prison. The soul, or divine spark, originates from the true God, but has been trapped in the material world. This idea led to a radically different understanding of salvation. In traditional Christianity, salvation comes through faith in Jesus, divine grace, and the forgiveness of sins. In Gnostic thought, salvation comes through self-knowledge, realizing that one's soul does not belong to this world and must seek to return to the higher divine realm. This knowledge, gnosis, was not meant for everyone. Only those who were spiritually awakened could truly grasp it. Some Gnostic groups believed they were the seed of Seth, a chosen lineage with special insight into the hidden truths of the universe. This elitism set them apart from many other early Christians, who emphasized the universality of salvation. At this point, we begin to realize that Gnosticism isn't just an ancient set of beliefs, it's a radical way of seeing reality. It challenges the idea that what we perceive is all there is, and suggests that true wisdom, the kind that liberates us, must be sought, uncovered, and directly experienced. And that raises an interesting question. How do we today pursue such hidden knowledge? How do we break free from the limits of conventional thinking and dive deeper into these mysteries? Well, that's exactly why I've put together a selection of carefully curated resources that can help you explore these ideas further. In the description, you'll find links to some of the best books, tools, and symbolic artifacts that will allow you to continue this journey into the hidden dimensions of reality. If you're fascinated by these ideas, I highly recommend reading the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, a collection of Gnostic texts that were lost for centuries. These are the actual writings that give us insight into how the Gnostics saw the world and their place within it. Or if you want a more accessible introduction, the Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels is an excellent starting point. It explores how these lost teachings challenge what we think we know about early Christianity. Many ancient traditions believed that certain symbols and objects could serve as portals to deeper understanding, helping to align the mind with universal truths. That's why I've also included links to carefully chosen artifacts like Metatron's cube pendants or sacred geometry prints, symbols that have been used for centuries as tools of contemplation and spiritual awakening. And if you're someone who learns best through experience, consider exploring binaural beats and frequency-based meditation tracks, which have been scientifically linked to altered states of consciousness and deep introspective thought. In the description, you'll find links to some of the most powerful sound frequencies designed to enhance meditation, focus, and even spiritual insight. So if you're ready to go beyond surface-level knowledge and truly experience these concepts for yourself, check out the description below. Each of these resources is there to help you unlock deeper understanding and move closer to the wisdom that has been hidden for centuries. The fall of Gnosticism. As Christianity became more organized and institutionalized, Gnostic ideas were increasingly suppressed. By the 4th century, with the rise of imperial Christianity under Constantine, church leaders sought to establish a clear doctrine, rejecting alternative interpretations. Key moments in this process included the councils of the 4th and 5th centuries, where Christian leaders debated doctrine and excluded Gnostic texts from the biblical canon. The efforts of figures like Athanasius of Alexandria, who in 367 CE compiled one of the earliest lists of books that would become the New Testament, rejecting all non-canonical Gospels, the destruction of Gnostic writings, and the labeling of Gnosticism as a dangerous heresy. By the time Christianity became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, Gnostic groups had mostly disappeared, either suppressed or absorbed into other movements. But while the Gnostic school of thought faded, its influence never completely vanished. Some ideas reappeared in later mystical traditions, and in modern times, Gnosticism has seen a resurgence of interest as people rediscover its alternative spiritual perspective, the legacy of Gnosticism. Although Gnostic movements largely disappeared by the 4th and 5th centuries, their influence never completely faded. Many of their ideas resurfaced in later religious and philosophical traditions, sometimes in unexpected ways. Medieval echoes of Gnostic thought. During the Middle Ages, some Christian groups were accused of holding Gnostic-like beliefs, even if they did not explicitly identify as Gnostics. Among them, the Cathars, 12th to 14th century Western Europe. This Christian sect held a dualist worldview, believing the material world was created by an evil force, and that true salvation required escaping from physical existence. Their beliefs led to them being labeled as heretics, and they were eventually suppressed by the Albigensian Crusade. The Bogomils, 10th to 15th century Balkans, a Christian movement that rejected institutionalized religion, emphasizing inner spiritual knowledge and a struggle against material corruption. Although it is difficult to prove direct historical links between these groups and ancient Gnosticism, the similarities in worldview suggest that Gnostic-like ideas never fully disappeared. Instead, they resurfaced in new forms throughout history. Gnostic influence in mysticism and esoteric traditions. Even beyond Christian movements, Gnostic themes can be found in various mystical and esoteric traditions. Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. Some interpretations of Kabbalistic cosmology bear striking similarities to Gnostic descriptions of divine emanations, aeons, and the hidden spiritual realm, pleroma. Sufism, Islamic mysticism. Some Sufi teachings emphasize the idea of inner knowledge, irfan, leading to spiritual liberation, a concept that closely resembles Gnostic ideas of gnosis. Alchemy and the occult Renaissance. The Hermetic tradition, which was deeply influential in Renaissance esotericism, shares many Gnostic themes, particularly the idea that divine wisdom is hidden and must be discovered through personal transformation. In this sense, while historical Gnosticism declined as a distinct movement, its core themes, the idea that hidden knowledge leads to liberation, that the material world is flawed, and that the divine is found within, continued to shape spiritual traditions for centuries. The modern revival of Gnostic thought. In recent decades, interest in Gnosticism has resurged, driven by the rediscovery of ancient texts, like the Nag Hammadi Library, which has provided direct access to Gnostic writings rather than relying solely on the interpretations of their critics. Scholarly research and public fascination with early Christianity, particularly the idea that Christianity was originally much more diverse than previously thought. The rise of alternative spirituality, with people seeking personalized, mystical, and esoteric approaches to religion rather than traditional institutional faiths. Today, some individuals and groups identify as modern Gnostics, seeking to revive and reinterpret ancient Gnostic wisdom in contemporary contexts. Online forums, academic courses, and books on Gnosticism have gained popularity, bringing these once-forgotten ideas back into public discussion. What Gnosticism teaches us today. Whether or not one subscribes to Gnostic beliefs, their perspective offers a unique lens through which to examine spirituality, philosophy, and the nature of reality. Some of the key takeaways from Gnosticism include the search for inner knowledge. Instead of relying solely on external authorities, Gnosticism encourages people to seek personal understanding and direct spiritual experience. Questioning the nature of reality. The idea that the world may not be what it appears to be invites deep reflection on the nature of existence, perception, and consciousness. The role of awakening and transformation. Many Gnostic texts emphasize spiritual awakening as the path to true liberation, a theme that resonates with many modern mystical traditions. Ultimately, the story of Gnosticism is not just about an ancient religious movement. It is about the ongoing human quest for truth, meaning, and enlightenment. The everlasting mystery of Gnosticism. The history of Gnosticism is not just a story about a lost religious movement. It is a reminder of the complexity and diversity of human spirituality. The Gnostics challenged the dominant narratives of their time, offering an alternative vision of the universe, the divine, and humanity's place within it. While they were ultimately marginalized by the rise of Christian orthodoxy, their ideas never fully disappeared. Instead, they influenced later mystical traditions, re-emerged in different religious movements, and continue to captivate seekers, scholars, and spiritual explorers today. The modern world is full of questions that echo the themes of Gnostic thought. What is the true nature of reality? Is there more to existence than what we perceive? How can we free ourselves from the illusions that limit us? What does it mean to seek deeper knowledge and enlightenment? For those drawn to these questions, the study of Gnosticism offers valuable insights, not as a fixed doctrine, but as a philosophical and spiritual framework that encourages exploration, self-discovery, and a deeper understanding of the mysteries of existence. Why Gnosticism still matters. Even though the ancient Gnostic texts were hidden for centuries, their rediscovery has sparked a new wave of interest in alternative spiritualities and forgotten histories. The fact that people today still resonate with these ideas shows that the human search for truth is eternal. So what can we learn from Gnosticism today? Questioning the status quo. The Gnostics refused to accept conventional wisdom at face value. Their teachings remind us to think critically, question assumptions, and seek deeper understanding. The power of inner knowledge. Gnosticism teaches that wisdom is not found in external authorities alone, but in direct experience, intuition, and self-discovery. The journey of awakening. The Gnostic myth of the soul trapped in the material world mirrors the idea that many people feel disconnected from their true selves. The path of Gnosis is about awakening to a greater reality. Whether one fully embraces Gnostic teachings or simply finds them thought-provoking, their legacy challenges us to look beyond the surface of reality and explore the deeper aspects of existence. Gnosticism may not have survived as an official religious movement, but its ideas live on, in philosophy, in mysticism, in literature, and in the minds of those who seek answers beyond the ordinary. The ancient texts that were once hidden away have now found their way back into the world, and with them a renewed opportunity to explore the profound questions they pose. For those who are curious, the journey into Gnosticism is just beginning.